The native dilemma. When the United States purchased Alaska in 1867, the Treaty of Cession made a critical distinction between inhabitants it considered civilized and Alaska Native peoples it classified as uncivilized tribes. This legal language had immediate consequences. Russians living in the territory at the time gained U.S. citizenship, while Alaska Natives were placed under federal jurisdiction without recognition of their land rights or legal status. Article 3 of the treaty effectively treated Native groups as subjects rather than citizens, setting the stage for decades of legal and political struggles. The U.S. military enforced policies that disregarded Native sovereignty. During the transfer ceremony in Sitka, Tlingit leaders objected to the lack of consultation about their rights. General Jefferson C. Davis dismissed them, calling natives troublesome savages. Soldiers later shot 2 Tlingit men without justification, establishing a pattern of violence without accountability. As one elder recalled, "They took our land first, then our dignity." Federal assimilation policies compounded these injustices. The 1884 Organic Act subjected Alaska Natives to U.S. laws without granting citizenship or land rights. Children were sent to boarding schools where speaking native languages meant punishment. "They cut our hair and burned our toys," remembered a Yupik elder. "We learned shame before we learned English." By the early 1900s, natives remained in legal limbo, subject to restrictions on movement and traditional practices. Land disputes intensified as the federal government claimed 90% of Alaska as public land. When Tlingit leaders protested commercial overfishing in 1912, officials arrested them for trespassing on ancestral grounds. Limited reforms came with the 1934 Indian Reorganization Act, but village councils lacked real authority. World War II brought military construction that displaced villages, while new workers introduced diseases and social problems. The 1971 Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, ANCSA, marked a radical departure from past policies. Facing oil development pressures, natives secured 44 million acres and $962.5 million through regional corporations rather than reservations. "We traded land titles for shareholder certificates," explained a Tlingit leader. While some corporations thrived, others struggled, creating economic disparities between regions. The corporate model also failed to fully protect cultural practices or subsistence rights. Health disparities reveal ongoing impacts of this history. Suicide rates among Native youth are 17 times the national average, what one health worker calls the wounds of colonialism made flesh. Traditional healing practices remain inaccessible for many, as Western clinical approaches dominate underfunded IHS facilities. Subsistence rights continue sparking legal battles. "When the state limits our fishing rights, they're limiting our survival," argues an Inupiaq hunter. Climate change worsens these conflicts, altering animal migrations and threatening food security. Coastal villages like Nutok now face relocation due to erosion, with costs exceeding $100 million. Cultural resilience persists despite these challenges. Language immersion programs are reviving Tlingit and Yupik in schools. The Alaska Native Brotherhood, founded in 1912, continues advocating for self-determination. "We're not shareholders first," says a current leader. "We're people with 10,000 years of history on this land." Modern governance blends traditional and imposed systems. Tribal councils coexist uneasily with corporate boards, while the Alaska Federation of Natives navigates political advocacy. Legal recognition remains limited. The 1998 Venati decision restricted tribal jurisdiction, leaving Alaska Natives with fewer rights than lower 48 tribes. Environmental changes add new pressures. Thawing permafrost damages infrastructure as melting ice invites drilling in fragile ecosystems. They're making decisions about our homelands without us, observes a Gwich'in activist opposing Arctic oil development. Yet cultural revitalization continues. Young activists organize around issues like missing indigenous women, while artists preserve traditional crafts. "Our culture isn't dying," says a carver teaching his grandson. "It's changing, but the heart remains." These efforts reflect adaptation to systemic injustices that began when the 1867 treaty labeled Alaska Natives uncivilized. The consequences still echo today, but so does the resilience of those working to reclaim their future. Economic success through resource extraction has left deep environmental scars. The state's fragile Arctic ecosystems bear the marks of industrial development, particularly from oil operations. This tension became undeniable on March 24, 1989, when the Exxon Valdez spilled 11 million gallons of crude oil across Prince William Sound's coastline. The disaster struck like a hammer blow to marine life. Within days, oil smothered habitats and killed hundreds of thousands of seabirds, fish, and marine mammals. Cleanup crews battled remote conditions with limited success, recovering less than 10% of the spill despite using booms, skimmers, and damaging hot water treatments. Investigations revealed preventable failures, an intoxicated captain, missing safety equipment, and delayed response times. These revelations birthed the Oil Pollution Act of 1990, mandating double-hulled tankers and better emergency plans. Prince William Sound's fishing communities felt the economic aftershocks for decades. Closed fisheries eliminated incomes while herring stocks collapsed. Though Exxon paid billions in cleanup and damages, oil persists in beach sediments like stubborn stains. The spill transformed public opinion, turning acceptance of environmental risks into skepticism about industry safety claims. Oil companies responded with improved technology, but the landscape still whispers warnings along oil-stained shores. Now climate change writes new chapters in Alaska's environmental story. Permafrost, the frozen foundation beneath 80% of the state, is thawing like melting glue. This destabilizes critical infrastructure, forcing engineers to constantly adjust the Trans-Alaska Pipeline supports as the ground buckles. Northern towns like Fairbanks sink into softening earth, their roads and buildings requiring perpetual repairs. Beneath the surface, a more insidious threat emerges. Ancient carbon, locked away for millennia, escapes as methane and CO2 when the ground warms. Scientists warn the Arctic's permafrost holds nearly double the carbon currently in our atmosphere, creating a dangerous feedback loop. Coastal villages face existential threats from rising seas. Nutok's Yupik community has watched helplessly as erosion devoured hundreds of feet of their shoreline. Their $100 million relocation effort, a desperate scramble to higher ground, highlights the staggering costs of climate adaptation. Other villages like Shishmaref and Kivalina wait in line for solutions that may come too late. Meanwhile, hunters report thinning sea ice that transforms traditional subsistence into a deadly gamble. Polar bears struggle as their hunting platforms vanish, while changing fish migrations disrupt food webs that sustain generations. Despite these warnings, industrial development pushes forward. Recent administrations opened the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge to oil leasing, while offshore projects in the Beaufort and Chukchi Seas risk spills in waters where cleanup would be impossible. The proposed pebble mine near Bristol Bay threatens vital fisheries, sparking fierce debates. Alaska's economic dependence on oil, 85% of state revenue, creates powerful inertia against environmental protections. Some legislators advocate renewable energy transitions, but oil remains the lifeblood funding schools and infrastructure. This contradiction defines Alaska's climate policy. While warming at twice the global rate, the state lacks a unified emissions plan. Anchorage crafts local solutions, while rural villages drown in challenges without resources. Even conservation efforts face climate-driven paradoxes. Initially, abundant glacial runoff benefits hydroelectric dams until the glaciers disappear. Northward creeping boreal forests may absorb carbon but destroy tundra ecosystems. Beavers, expanding their range, engineer ponds that accelerate permafrost thaw. Nature's cruel irony. Engineers deploy technological stopgaps. Buildings on adjustable pilings, artificial ground cooling systems, advanced pipeline sensors. But these solutions merely delay the inevitable reckoning between development and preservation. Alaska's landscape serves as a living classroom where students learn about the Exxon Valdez not just as history, but as an ongoing lesson in environmental stewardship. Scientific data paints an urgent picture: vanishing sea ice, retreating glaciers, and disrupted wildlife populations. Winter temperatures rise fastest, rewriting the rules of northern ecosystems. While some changes appear locked in, researchers emphasize that emission reductions could prevent worst-case scenarios. Alaska now stands at a crossroads where climate impacts outpace responses. The Exxon Valdez showed how quickly accidents can devastate ecosystems, while climate change delivers slower but more comprehensive transformation. Both demand balancing immediate economic needs against long-term survival, a test Alaska continues to face. The state's future hinges on finding sustainable paths that honor both its natural wealth and those who depend on it. From oil-stained beaches to melting permafrost, Alaska's landscapes wear their scars visibly, reminders that resource extraction always leaves marks, whether sudden spills or gradual thaws. The